How's it going, everybody? My name is CaptnSarcasm, and I'm here again doing kind of like what I did with my Alarial build, where I give you a sped up version and kind of talk my way through how I did everything to kind of give you a better idea of how maybe you could try this yourself. Two things: I do want to apologize for the crappy camera quality. I had the webcam up high and it wouldn't focus correctly, and that's kind of why it like flickers in and out. You might see it more on the real speed. But basically here, it's just, I wasn't expecting Drycha to be as small as she was, and I knew that I wanted to put lights inside of her. But she was a lot smaller than I thought she was going to end up being. So the first good little bit of this is me getting everything cut out, getting it shaved off, and figuring out how it goes together so that I can then start trying to get the lights put inside of her. So the hardest part being is the instructions, of course, start off with the legs. The legs, there's only one side of the legs has lights going through it, so that was kind of fairly easy to figure out how to do. And I actually used a Dremel tool that you can see me using right here to kind of cut grooves in the plastic. Made a huge mess. Like, I kind of regret doing it by my computer because now there's just like plastic shavings all inside of my keyboard, and it's probably going to be there until I end up killing it and throwing it away. But yeah, the first part was getting it into the leg, but it was also really difficult because I couldn't properly glue it and get it tucked away in there because it had to go throughout the whole rest of the body, and I didn't want to glue anything down and make it finalized until I knew how it was going to rest inside of the upper torso, because you've got the Drycha's left leg, the little fungusy thing sticking out of her butt. Then you've got both of her arms and the back piece that comes off of from behind her neck. So here I am. I'm still actually right there. You saw me with the pinning tool. I'm using that to drill into all of the honeycombs. And at first, you know, I would cut it out trying to figure out how I was going to work with the legs. So I'm trying to do this while also not stabbing myself with the pinning tool and, you know, bring out any blood. And that particular pinning tool is actually a piece of shit. I left right here to go to my buddy Zach's place. He lives in the same complex as I do, and I'm gonna use his pinning tool right there. The bit in mine was really crappy, and it would keep slipping through, and it wouldn't sit correctly. So if I pushed too hard, then it would shove itself inside the tool, and it was basically useless. But his one was amazing. So here I am. I'm playing with the lights, trying to see how to fit it in there, how to leave just enough of a gap with the Dremel that the wiring will fit through, the light will sit inside, and it won't move. So it took quite a bit of kind of finagling and just getting stuff to fit just right so that the light would be like held in there and show through, but the wiring was also not making the plastic piece stick too far out or not glue down properly. And that was another thing that was kind of a pain to really figure out, is how to get everything to sit and glue and hold. Because I knew that there was, like, unlike Alarial, where I can actually take all the wiring out and replace it if one of the bulbs goes bad or whatever. This one is pretty much permanent, just from the way that I had to build it. And here I was actually smart. I left all the honeycombs in the sprue itself, so I had something better to hold on to. So I just spent the next, God, I think this took me half an hour just to drill all the holes in all the honeycombs for the arms, the backs, and the leg and whatnot. But yeah, if any of the bulbs goes bad in Alarial, or the circuitry gets messed up or pinched and it doesn't work anymore, she's basically just dead in the water, because I have no way of getting her apart to replace the pieces. Unlike the Beetle, where it's all just housed on the in the back of it, there was no way to kind of like internally store it like I was on the Beetle. So yeah, I just I had to be really careful, make sure I didn't pinch anything. And the cool thing about these lights is that there was actually a little bit of an excess on the end of it. I don't know what's going on with the camera right there, But so I had a little bit too much, but because of the way that the wiring worked, I was actually able to just cut off. Oh, there's Brooklyn, annoying the crap out of me. And even with cutting the end off, I didn't have to solder anything back together or any of that. It just kept working. So yeah, apparently I spent a lot more time drilling out those honeycomb things than I actually realized. It was one of the most fun things I've ever done in my whole life. Said no one ever. Alright, looks like I'm actually going back to putting things together again. So that looks like one of her arms that I was working on there. This one was actually really difficult to figure out because basically the way that I wired it is it goes up the left leg and inside of the torso. So it goes up the leg in the torso, one of the bulbs goes into the back butt piece, and then it kind of like bends in there and then comes back, goes into the torso, goes into the back, and then from there it goes into one arm, and then it has to double back to go through again, through the torso and into the other arm. So that was actually the hardest thing for me to try to figure out how to do, was to get that stuff to, was to get the wiring to allow me to double back through one of the arms and out the other side. And just with the spacing of the bulb and how much wiring there was, it was really, really difficult to get that all shoved in there. And I actually wasn't able to hide all of the wiring. Like, it was just impossible. There was not enough space. Because like the shoulder piece and the front arm, I could barely get the bulb inside of there and have enough room to still glue it down. And I had to shave quite a bit of plastic off to make room for all the wiring. But let's see, where am I at now? So it looks like I still have all the legs together, or I just have all the legs together with the piece already in there. So at this point in time, I'm already at the point of no return. The wiring's in there, and that's just where it is. If I mess up now, then I basically just have an unlit Drycha model to work with, which also made it a little bit difficult because the wiring being pretty stiff as I'm trying to position the hands and everything, it's moving around, and that's right there looks like me trying to figure out how the piece can stay on and still have the piece inside of it. It looks like I got one end shoved into the glove, or the forearm, I guess. Yeah, and now I'm trying to figure out how it's going into the shoulder piece, which was very, very, very difficult because I had to make sure that the bulb was in there enough to stay inside, but also be able to glue the forearm and the shoulder piece together, and yet still have all of that be able to go and fit into the torso without leaving any major gaps or anything like that. And of course, thankfully I had the Dremel tool, which made this so much easier. If I had to do this with a like X-Acto knife or something, I wouldn't have a thumb anymore, for one, and it just would have taken forever. I don't even know how I would have done it without a Dremel tool. So I have to thank Kayla for buying that for her own cosplay stuff. I stole the crap out of it for this. But it looks like I've already got one of the arms on, so I've already figured out the doubling back issue. Now I'm just at the point of, I had to get it into the other arm before I could really get the other half of the, apparently I took a World of Warcraft break here. I'll skip through this here in a minute. Alright, so I'm done with my World of Warcraft break, back into trying to get the arm to work. So I had to get the arm done so that I could know how much I was going to have to stuff back inside of the torso to kind of like cut off the very ends of it. So for like the shoulders and the forearms, I had to dig grooves in the plastic where the wiring would go through, but for the torso, I actually had to drill holes into the like the arm sockets. So there was a groove in the top part of the arm itself, and then there was a hole in the torso that it would go through that groove in the top part of the arm and then into the hole of the torso. So it looks like here I'm just making sure that I've got all the honeycomb bits kind of situated and squared away. I gave a very close-up view of that. I might have to slow that down back in post so that you guys can see it a little better. But so what I did there on the base, you can see I skipped priming and everything, but what I've done is I took some painter's tape and I wrapped up the rest of the wire for the lighting bit, the part that doesn't have any lights to it. It's just like shielded, insulated wire. Taped that around, put it in beside the battery mechanism. Got painter's tape, long strip of it, folded it in half, and then I cut that, and I basically made just like a little hollow bit, and I used a bunch of super glue on the side and just made it really, really stiff. So it's kind of like a little sleeve almost that you can put it in. So that way I'd still be able to base it and have a way to hide, quote unquote, the batteries there, because unlike with Alario where I could hide it inside of the back of the Beetle, there was nowhere for me to put this thing. I thought about putting it underneath the base, but then it would be sitting on top of it and kind of wobbling around, and it wouldn't really flow well. So this is the best that I could think of to conceal it, I guess. This actually took a lot longer painting wise than I thought it would, getting all of the brown done, because thankfully GW has the gray that I use to base all of my Sylvaneth model, so I didn't have to paint all the gray as well as the brown. So I was just able to prime it, get that done, and then honestly for her, once the brown was done, that was kind of the hardest. It was the most time consuming. The hardest part was actually painting the blue amphora that's tucked away in her right leg, because it was really, really tucked in there and it's kind of hard to get to. But I thought I was going to be able to get a lot more detail on her, but she really just kind of didn't have much to detail. You have the browns, you've got the gray stone that I do for my Sylvaneth army, and then you've got the amphora, couple eyeballs, and it's really just dry brushing. I could have done the beetles or the wasps or whatever that come out of her honeycombs, I guess, but with the lights being on the inside, I thought that might just distract a little too much, so I left them out. I guess that might be where some of her cooler details come into effect. But yeah, this part's pretty boring, just watching me spend about a day putting all the brown around everywhere without clogging up any of the holes and the honeycomb bits. Then you get her hair. Looks like I'm on the back side. Oh, now I'm on the front. This is riveting stuff right here. Just gonna take a sip of my drink until something interesting happens. You know what's funny? I have a whole Sylvaneth army, never played them, not once. I got the rulebook and everything to learn how to play them, and then I just kind of never did, because no one I really hung out with played Age of Sigmar, so never did it. Yep. Really don't know what else to say right here. Oh, there was Breed for a second. She came and said hello to the stream. Oh yeah, so this is about the time where I stopped using Twitch and I went to YouTube, and the quality kind of shit. For some reason it knocked itself down to 720 instead of 1080, so I really don't know what the hell happened with that. I'm gonna have to figure out what I did. Alright, so finally I'm done with the browns, it looks like. I've got the blue pot out, so I'm working on the amphora in her right leg. That was just time consuming, and I know that there's probably parts that I missed just because of how tight that particular space is, and getting the right angles on the brush, and having honestly crappy lights. I really wish that I had some fluorescent bulbs above my desk that I could use when painting this, just because there's so many shadows with the 2 lights that I have. And I actually went out and got some different green paints from what I've been using, because Drycha I kind of feel has been like a older, more decrepit kind of creature in the Sylvaneth army, so I wanted her leaves to be kind of in the pre-fall stage, so they're kind of a dirty green instead of the bright, vibrant green that's like my tree lords have and what Alariel and her beetle have got on them. So I also use the same sort of greens. I actually painted the wires for the lights with the green to make them look more like vines, and they're not as noticeable, especially considering that I had them in there when I primed them, so they're no longer shiny and silver. They were the dull gray, so getting them that kind of crappy, I say crappy, but the kind of dirtier green color makes them look more like vines and kind of hides them better, so they're not as noticeable. I think it worked out okay. I mean, I know what I'm looking for, and I kind of overlooked them, so it's a bit of a bonus. So I mean, that's pretty much it. Just going on with the detail work, getting the underside of her back pieces, the mushrooms or whatever you want to call them. Just more detail work, and then eventually we'll get on into some dry brushing. So there goes some of the golder colors that I was using for the lid of the amphora. And now here we go for all the washes. This is actually not as bad as I thought. I thought that using the washes was going to get into the holes of the honeycombs and really clog them up, but I only had to drill out 2 or 3 of them. I was a little bit more careful, I think, than what I normally would be, because normally when I wash stuff, I just absolutely slather it with it, and just so that it really gets in the grooves and really gets you those darker shades. And yeah, for once I actually took my time with the washes and made sure I got everything the way it needed to be. Look at me go. Didn't have any drips this time either. Normally I use so much wash that it drips and gets all over my my little mat, but just goes to show how careful I was. I was also kind of worried that I might short out one of the lights if I got them too wet or something. I don't know. I'm stupid. Here I go with the pinning tool to make sure all the holes are open so that when the lights are on, they're not being covered by anything. And now the dry brushing. This is actually not that bad of a dry brush, because it was really 3 colors, if that. You've got the brown, the greens, the gray. I didn't dry brush anything on the blue. I think I used a little bit of the gray dry brush on the white and make it pop just a little bit, but nothing really much that you wouldn't do anywhere else. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's not a whole lot left going on in here. I kind of skipped, I didn't stream or record the basing of her. It was kind of my first time doing it, and I was kind of having a bit of a crappy day, so I just did it in my free time. I used super glue and sand on the base to give it a bit of texture, and then I used Sterling Mud, which is already a texture paint, but having the sand on there, you don't have to use nearly as much of the Sterling to get the kind of grainy dirt kind of look, I feel. So that's why I went ahead and glued sand down before I did the Sterling Mud. Oh, actually, here I am putting the sand down now. But after that, I had some rocks that I glued down, and I used some of the Games Workshop grass on top of it. Just kind of sprinkled it on, and we'll get to the final pictures where you can see how the grass turned out. But there's a Sterling Mud that I put on top of the sand. Yeah, I really usually let it sit for about a day. I don't want my brush or the paint getting in on any of the super glue, because it's not good for the brush. So yeah, the grass actually turned out pretty good. The lights shine through really, really great. Kind of wish that I'd spent a little bit more time putting like green stuff and the cracks on her shoulders make it a little bit more seamless. But in the end, I'm really proud with how she turned out, and if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them in a timely manner, and I hope you enjoyed the video.